Beneath the vault of endless stars, where the wind whispers secrets older than memory, I beheld a desert stretched beyond the eye, silent yet trembling with unseen voices. And I asked within my heart why the sons of one father wander as foes beneath the same sky. The tent of Abraham, once a place of laughter and promise, now lay in shadow, its corners holding the echoes of a covenant whose threads had been torn. For even as the patriarch breathed blessings, 2 children grew beneath his gaze, one favored, one wandering, yet both carrying the weight of destiny. Hagar, exiled yet lifted by a voice from heaven, walked a wilderness where the sands themselves seemed to mark the passage of divine intention. And Ishmael, son of the handmaid, wild in spirit and yet touched by mercy, became the first echo of a people fated to roam the earth, like the wind that shapes the dunes. In contrast, Isaac, the child of promise, laughed beneath the warmth of Sarah's son, unaware of the shadow that stretched behind him, unaware that each smile carried the seed of rivalry and sorrow. For the blessing of Abraham was not a gift of land alone, but a spark of heaven, and heaven's spark burns brightest when tested by the darkness of envy. I moved among visions, seeing angels poised upon the ridge of night, their forms luminous against the eternal stars, watching the sons of Abraham with eyes both tender and severe. And I understood that the conflict was older than men, older than kingdoms, older than the hills of Canaan, that would one day drink the blood of misunderstanding. The heavens themselves conspired to teach the children that mercy and pride are twin flame, one that warms, one that consumes, and every path diverged beneath the eternal horizon, as though the world itself were drawn into judgment. I saw the spirits of the future walking beside the boys, whispering names of kings and prophets, of empires yet to rise and fall, of nations that would claim the soil as their own, yet remain blind to the covenant that binds heart to heart. And I asked, what is inheritance, if not the obedience of faith? And what is blessing if it becomes the object of greed? The desert answered not with voice, but with silence. And in that silence I perceived the faint murmur of waters unseen, a river of promise that flows beneath every conflict, beneath every act of human strife. And it is this river that carries the hope of reconciliation. Though centuries may pass before the sons of Abraham kneel once more beneath the same tent and recognize that they have never truly been apart. And so I entered the vision of the night, tracing the footprints of Ishmael and Isaac, noting how each step laid the groundwork for enmity and grace alike, how laughter and tears intertwine in the eternal design. And I understood that the tale was not yet ended, for even the stars above bend toward destiny, and the desert itself waits for the hour when the children of promise will awaken to the voice of the one who set them upon their paths. This is the beginning of their journey, and mine, a journey through shadow and light, through fear and hope, that I might tell the story of the brothers whose lives are the mirror of humankind. And in that mirror, see reflected the solemn truth that even the oldest rift can be healed, that even the wandering son may find his way, and that the covenant of Abraham stretches beyond time, awaiting the return of all who listen to its quiet, eternal call. I entered deeper into the vision where the desert stretched infinite, and the stars above whispered secrets that only silence could hold. And I perceived the hidden truth that few have dared to see, that the enmity between the sons of Abraham was not born of anger alone, nor of mortal misunderstanding, but of a covenant whose edges are too fine for mortal hands to grasp. Hagar, fleeing yet guided by the unseen hand of mercy, wandered beneath the unyielding sun, her eyes lifted to the heavens where angels hovered unseen. And I understood that her path, though marked by exile, was paved with purpose. Ishmael, untamed and strong, bore within his breast the first seed of a nation. Yet every step he took across the sands carried both blessing and burden, for the hand of man often misreads the voice of God, and the wilderness teaches lessons that no palace could ever convey. In contrast, Isaac lay beneath the canopy of his mother's care, laughing with the ease of one untouched by doubt. Yet his very laughter stirred a shadow that would reach across generations. For the promise of Abraham was a double-edged flame. It warms the heart of the obedient, yet blinds the eye of those who covered it without faith. I saw visions of the future etched upon the sand, cities rising, kingdoms clashing, children of both lines looking to the stars as if seeking the answer to a question their souls already knew. And I understood that the true battlefield lay not upon soil or stone, but within the hearts of those who carry the memory of blessing alongside the hunger for possession. Angels, their forms, radiant yet inscrutable, guided my gaze to the meeting of two streams, one bright as crystal, one wild as storm, flowing together yet, never mingling. And I perceive that this is the river of prophecy, the current that bears the children of Abraham through trial and time, whispering that mercy is stronger than vengeance and that reconciliation is the reward of those who endure. Each vision revealed the duality of destiny. Hagar's anguish mirrored Isaac's innocence. Ishmael's wanderings reflected Jacob's wrestling, and the promise, like a hidden sun, and illuminated both paths, yet remained unseen by those who measured the world with pride. I moved among spectres of kings and prophets, their voices, a chorus that echoed in the wind, reminding me that history is but the shadow of eternity, and that the conflicts of men, though violent and loud, are whispers compared to the eternal covenant that binds all generations. The sands beneath my feet seemed to shift with memory itself, revealing the footprints of those long past and those yet unborn. And I saw that every cry of sorrow, every act of obedience, every prayer lifted from the tents of Abraham and Hagar, from the laughter of Isaac to the tears of Ishmael, is woven into a tapestry unseen, a fabric of divine purpose that only time can reveal. The desert wind carried echoes of angels singing, low and haunting, and in that melody I discerned the lesson. Hidden in plain sight, the enmity of brothers is a shadow cast by human misunderstanding upon a light that is eternal. The rivalry is not a punishment but a test, a call to recognize that blessing cannot be hoarded, that promise flows like water and touches all who are faithful. I saw visions of future generations walking the same sands, their hearts heavy with the memory of rivalry, yet some chosen by courage and love, lifting their eyes to the sky, hearing in the winds the voice of God calling them back to unity. And I understood that the wilderness itself, though harsh and unyielding, is a teacher whose lessons are written in the language of survival and grace, that every moment of suffering holds a revelation, and every exile carries the possibility of return. The sons of Abraham, though divided by lineage and by circumstance, are bound together by threads invisible to mortal sight, threads woven from the fabric of mercy and obedience. And as I moved through the visions, I perceived a greater truth. The story of Isaac and Ishmael is not merely a tale of ancient conflict, but a mirror for all who walk in shadow, for all who carry longing alongside pride, for all who must learn that reconciliation begins within before it manifests upon the earth. The angels whispered that even the oldest wounds may be healed, that even the most wandering sons may return to the tent of Abraham, and that the covenant endures beyond enmity, beyond time, beyond fear. I walked among visions of laughter and tears, of exile and return, and I knew that the true revelation is not in the walls built by men, nor in the kingdoms that rise and fall, but in the awakening of the heart in the recognition that mercy outweighs judgment, and that the covenant of Abraham stretches its arms across generations, waiting for the sons and daughters to remember, to forgive, and to return. And thus the desert spoke not with voice but with essence, revealing that the enmity of brothers is but a prelude, a necessary shadow that makes the coming light shine more brilliantly. And I felt within me the weight of prophecy, the call of eternity, and the solemn joy that even in exile, even in rivalry, the covenant whispers return. For all paths lead to mercy, and all hearts may yet unite beneath the stars of Abraham, beneath a sky where stars weave silent patterns upon the night. I saw the covenant stretch like a river of light across the generations. And I understood that inheritance is not measured by soil nor by stone, but by the spirit that receives it. The sons of Abraham walked paths divergent, yet bound, one carrying the promise of obedience, the other the strength of survival, and both were heirs to a gift too vast for mortal eyes to grasp. I observed the desert wind lifting sands like parchment, upon which unseen hands inscribe the decree of eternity, reminding all who walk beneath the heavens that blessing is a current, not a possession, and that the river of covenant flows through heart before it touches the earth. Isaac, tender in the shade of his father's tent, embodied the light of obedience, the calm certainty that comes when one trusts the invisible hand. Yet even his laughter cast a shadow that stretched to the distant hills where Ishmael wandered, untamed, listening to the voice of angels he scarcely recognized. And I saw how human will twists the currents of mercy into channels of pride. The inheritance, I realized, is a song sung by stars, a melody whose notes are faith, patience, and humility, and those who attempt to grasp it by might alone taste only its shadow, a shadow that hardens hearts and divides sons from brothers. In visions I beheld Jacob wrestling with angels, a reflection of the same struggle that pulses through the veins of every descendant to claim the blessing without knowing its weight, to pursue the promise without yielding to its demand, and to learn that obedience and mercy are entwined as vine and tree, light and shadow inseparable. The covenant is a prism I saw scattering its rays across time, casting hues of joy, sorrow, exile, and return, and each generation sees only one fragment, believing it whole, while ignoring the fullness of the light. Hagar's exile, Ishmael's wandering, Isaac's laughter, Abraham's prayers, they are the notes of this eternal melody. A composition whose rhythm is not dictated by human understanding but by the pulse of divine will. I followed the spirits of the future along the paths of sand and rock, noting how kingdoms would rise and crumble, how men would claim ownership of lands they did not understand, and how wars would echo the misunderstanding of inheritance, a misreading of covenant. Yet in the quiet between the storms, I perceived the voice of angels reminding the wandering sons that the covenant is alive, that the inheritance is measured in mercy and faithfulness, and that even the exiled, even the rejected, are woven into the same tapestry of purpose. I saw rivers converging in the desert, streams of light that refuse to mix, yet move together toward the horizon, symbolic of the dual paths of Isaac and Ishmael, of obedience and human striving, of blessing and trial. And I knew that all who walk these paths are called to recognize the source, to bend toward the current of mercy and not the banks of pride. The inheritance is not possession but participation. It is the hand lifted in prayer, the heart open to forgiveness, the eye that discerns the divine even in shadow. And I perceived that the covenant itself is like a tree, its roots invisible, its branches reaching over deserts, mountains, and generations, sheltering both sons, both nations, in the shade of mercy, awaiting the hour when hearts awaken to their unity. The desert winds whispered across the dunes, carrying the sound of footsteps yet unseen, a warning and a promise. Those who hoard the blessing find only hunger. Those who share it discover abundance. And all who recognize that the covenant is alive see the inheritance not as a prize, but as a living river flowing through time. The night sky shimmered with constellations that mirrored the lineages of Isaac and Ishmael, stars moving in patterns that spoke of destiny and trial. And I felt the weight of generations pressing upon the present, a reminder that inheritance is both gift and responsibility, mercy and obedience entwined. The angels, their forms luminous and inscrutable, hovered over the paths, reminding the sons that the covenant cannot be divided, that every act of faith ripples outward, every choice of pride sends shadows across the land, and that the river of blessing bends toward mercy even when men strive to dam it with their desire. And so I beheld a vision of the future sons and daughters walking in the light of understanding, hearts lifted in recognition that inheritance is not given by hand alone, but received in spirit. That blessing flows where obedience and compassion meet, that even exile is a classroom where mercy teaches the hearts of men, and that the covenant of Abraham stretches beyond every rift, waiting for the hour when brothers will once more meet beneath the stars and recognize that the inheritance was never meant to divide, but to unite, and that the blessing itself is eternal, as endless as the desert and as luminous as the night sky, where angels weave their silent symphony above the wandering and the obedient alike. I wandered further through the desert of vision, where shadows stretched long across the dunes and the wind carried whispers of sorrow and hope intertwined. And I beheld a scene that mirrored the inner workings of all hearts, two brothers standing beneath the same sun. One strong, one timid, one laughing, one weeping, yet both bound by the invisible thread of blood and promise. Their footsteps stirred the sands, leaving impressions that told stories older than words, and I perceived that every human soul carries within it such a wilderness, a landscape of conflict and yearning where light and shadow duel unseen. The older brother, proud and wary, cast his gaze upon the younger, measuring every movement, every glance, as though the inheritance of blessing were a burden he alone must claim. And yet even in his sternness there was longing, the quiet ache of desire for recognition. For love acknowledged the younger brother, innocent in his delight, yet burdened by memory, looked upon his elder with both admiration and fear, sensing the invisible weight pressing upon him, the judgment that cannot be spoken, and in his heart stirred a hope that reconciliation might yet bloom. Though the desert seemed infinite and the sky distant, Hagar, watching from the edge of the vision, whispered to the winds that mercy walks with the meek, and that the exiled may return to the tent of their father if only they listen. The sands shimmered with the footsteps of generations yet unborn, each echo carrying lessons of envy and grace, pride and obedience. And I understood that this desert is not merely a place but a mirror. It reflects the inner struggle of every soul, where anger and longing, courage and fear wrestle beneath the same eternal sun. I saw rivers of light running unseen beneath the dunes, flowing into the hearts of men, teaching that forgiveness is the path that leads from shadow to illumination, that every act of kindness bends the arc of destiny toward mercy. The brothers reached for the same fruit of the tree of promise, and in their grasping they struck each other, though neither meant harm. And I saw that often our conflicts with others are but shadows of the conflict within, the struggle to reconcile desire with duty, hope with fear, blessing with humility. Angels hovered above, their wings spanning the horizon like tapestries of radiant truth. And they whispered that the heart of Abraham is alive within all who carry faith, that the covenant is not broken by quarrel, and that the path from rivalry to reconciliation is paved with patience and love. I followed the brothers as they moved through valleys and hills, encountering mirages that reflected their innermost fears. One saw himself alone, rejected, unblessed. The other saw his brother triumphant and distant, untouchable by mercy. Yet with each step, the desert taught them endurance, and the light filtered through clouds, revealing that blessing is both given and received. That inheritance is a living river whose course is guided by obedience and compassion. In the shadows I glimpsed the spirits of those yet to come, children of Abraham, who would inherit not only land but the weight of generations. And I understood that every act of envy and every act of grace shapes the sands for centuries, that human hearts mirror the terrain of prophecy itself. The elder brother fell to his knees, not in defeat but in awakening, recognizing that strength alone does not claim blessing. And the younger lifted his hands in understanding, seeing that mercy is not weakness but illumination. The desert around them shimmered, dunes turning to golden waves, and the wind carried the scent of possibility, the promise that reconciliation, though hard won, is the destiny of the faithful. I beheld Abraham's tent of Hagar, bathed in celestial light, and the brothers, though weary, began to walk toward it, their shadows merging. And I realized that this is the true lesson of the wilderness, that human strife is a canvas upon which mercy paints its masterpieces, that the trials of life reflect the eternal struggle between pride and humility, and that even the most divided hearts may find unity when they remember the voice that first spoke over the sands, return, for the covenant waits, and love endures beyond enmity. And as the sun dipped low behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows that mingled with light, I understood that this vision of two brothers is not merely a story of Abraham's lineage, but a mirror for all who walk the earth. For every soul carries a wilderness within, and every step toward understanding, forgiveness, and grace is a step toward the eternal tent, where all may gather beneath the stars of promise, beneath a sky where stars glimmered like the eyes of unseen watchers. I beheld the two brothers standing upon the ridge of the desert, and I felt the weight of their choices echo within my own heart. The elder, proud and burdened, cast his gaze across the sands, seeing the younger, yet wondering if mercy could ever dwell within him. The younger, aware of the shadow behind him, trembled at the thought of reconciliation, yet yearned for the touch of understanding that might soothe the wounds of lineage. And I asked within myself, as if the angels themselves posed the question, if you were Ishmael, could you forgive the laughter that replaced your tears, the blessing that seemed denied, the favor you believed belonged to another? If you were Esau, could you embrace Jacob after the theft of birthright, after the cunning and deceit that marked your brother's path? The desert whispered in answer, carrying the weight of every soul who has wandered in pride, every spirit who has carried grievance as a cloak, every heart who has mistaken desire for righteousness. And in that wind, I saw shadows of countless generations, children of Abraham, who walked the earth bearing the same burden, repeating the rift in ways both subtle and violent, yet all beneath the watchful gaze of the covenant, whose threads are finer than any human perception, and whose current flows unbroken through every choice of mercy or vengeance. I followed the footprints of the brothers through valleys of memory, where each step seemed mirrored in my own reflections, the times I hoarded blessing, the moments I refused forgiveness, the hours when pride eclipsed compassion. And I understood that the conflict of nations is but a reflection of the wilderness within angels hovered, luminous against the night, whispering that to forgive is not to forget, but to release the shadow that binds. That to see the face of God in one who has wronged you is to step into the river of mercy and carry its current to the ends of the earth. I watched as the elder lifted his hand, not to strike, but to bless. And the younger bent, not in submission, but in understanding. And the sands shimmered with light as though heaven itself had breathed upon the reconciliation. And I perceive that this is the lesson written across generations. Every act of pride prolongs the desert. Every act of compassion brings the river closer. And the covenant of Abraham waits for hearts willing to surrender their right to wrath, their claim to judgment, their desire to possess what is freely given by mercy. I saw visions of future children, descendants of both lines, walking among ruins of old cities, carrying memories of exile and laughter. And I understood that the heart of man repeats itself in every generation, that the struggle to forgive, to embrace, to see beyond self, is the crucible through which the inheritance flows. The desert rose and fell in waves, as though breathing with the sighs of all who have ever wronged or been wronged. And I felt the pull of time bending around the covenant, urging the sons and daughters of Abraham to remember that blessing is a river, not a treasure, that the promise is a light, not a crown, that the path of reconciliation is narrow yet luminous, and all who walk it are touched by the wings of the unseen. And as the stars spun overhead, I heard the faint echo of a voice, neither human nor angel, but the voice of eternity itself, asking, will you release the shadow of your brother? Will you lift the hand of forgiveness? Will you walk toward mercy even when the weight of pride presses upon your soul? And I knew that the question is not for the distant past, not only for Ishmael or Isaac, not merely for nations divided by covenant and soil, but for every soul who bears memory and desire, for every heart that must choose between vengeance and love, for every human who seeks inheritance without understanding. The angel's wings shimmered in the night as if to show the path on the desert itself, glowing faintly with the light of promise. And I felt the eternal truth that every act of forgiveness bends history, that every choice of mercy reshapes destiny, and that the covenant of Abraham, though unseen, waits for those who answer its call, who meet their brothers and sisters not with anger, but with compassion, not with pride, but with humility, not with desire to claim, but with the courage to bless. And so I left the vision, knowing that the desert will continue to stretch across generations, yet within it flows the river of mercy, carrying the promise that even the deepest rift may heal, even the oldest wound may close, even the most wandering son may return to the tent beneath the stars where all may stand reconciled, and that the covenant endures beyond pride, beyond fear, beyond time itself. I descended into visions of time where the sands of Canaan stretched infinite beneath the stars, and I perceived the echoes of Scripture weaving through the ages as if the earth itself bore witness to covenant and promise. The voice of Genesis spoke upon the wind, recounting Hagar in the wilderness, her child, Ishmael cradled by mercy unseen. And I saw the angel descending like a shaft of celestial light, whispering that the boy shall become a great nation, that his hand shall be against all, yet all shall know the touch of God. The desert trembled beneath these words, as though every grain of sand remembered the covenant's reach. And I beheld Abraham's lineage unfolding like a river of stars across the sky. Isaac laughing beneath Sarah's care, the son of promise. Yet shadowed by the exile of his brother, the hills and valleys bore witness, and the spirits of kings and prophets moved unseen, marking the passages where blessing would become conflict, and conflict returned to blessing. I followed visions of empires rising and falling upon the same stones: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, their banners bright and yet fleeting, their victories ephemeral, for the covenant endured beyond them, unseen, immutable, like the hidden pulse of light beneath the night. Isaiah's voice thundered across the visions in that day: a highway shall stretch from Egypt to Assyria, and Israel shall be the third with them. Even a blessing in the midst of the land. And I saw Pharaoh and the Assyrian kneeling, not in fear, but in awe, as the light of mercy touched their hearts. A vision of reconciliation beyond human quarrel. I wandered through Psalms where Jerusalem's peace was called for, and I saw the city rise, not in brick and stone alone, but in spirit, shimmering with prayers, its gates adorned with the echoes of faith, where the covenant song rang louder than the clash of swords. And then I beheld the coming of Christ, walking the hills of Galilee, his eyes upon the city, weeping, lamenting, yet revealing that salvation is not conquest, but mercy, that the lineage of promise is fulfilled in grace beyond division, that the exile of Ishmael and the blessing of Isaac are bound together in one eternal design. Paul appeared in my vision, his scrolls glowing in the dim light of a desert dawn, proclaiming that not all who are Israel are children of promise, yet all who believe are heirs, that salvation flows like a river to provoke mercy in the world, that the covenant is not bound to land but to faith, and that even those exiled and wandering are counted in the measure of grace. I saw Jerusalem trembling under Romansiege, the temple aflame, yet the covenant survived. The people scattered across the earth, their memory a living prophecy of endurance, while Ishmael's descendants flourished across deserts and mountains, forming nations and empires, their hands both powerful and restless, yet marked by the unseen hand of the Creator. The visions intertwined, past and future merging, and I saw the covenant not as an artifact of history, but as a living river flowing through every generation, guiding hearts, shaping destiny. The prophet's eyes glowed with eternal fire, warning that enmity and pride are shadows, but mercy and obedience are the substance of blessing. Ezekiel's dry bones rose, a vision of resurrection, not only of flesh, but of faith, of heart, of nations divided, awaiting the day when Israel and Ishmael, Isaac and all descendants, might recognize the unseen hand that guides them, might bend toward mercy and not revenge, might see in one another the reflection of Abraham's heart. The desert winds carried the voices of angels, whispering across ages, showing how every conquest, every exile, every blessing, every betrayal is but a thread in the tapestry of the covenant. And I beheld the future yet unseen, sons and daughters of Abraham standing among ruins and blossoms alike, walking the line between shadow and light, their hearts shaped by mercy, their eyes lifted to the stars, understanding that the promise endures beyond empires, beyond kings, beyond human reckoning, that the covenant's river flows eternally, and that every act of faith and forgiveness bends its current toward reconciliation. I felt the pulse of generations beneath my feet, the sand shifting with memory and hope, and I understood that the story of Abraham's sons is not merely ancient history, but a living testimony. The covenant of God moves unseen, shaping the destiny of all who walk beneath the heavens, whispering always to return, to forgive, to embrace, and to bless, for in mercy lies the inheritance, and in love flows the eternal light of promise. I walked among visions of the present, where the sands of ancient Canaan seem mirrored in the streets and valleys of men, and I beheld the echoes of Isaac and Ishmael playing out in every heart and city. The sun rose over lands divided, casting long shadows of pride and fear across walls built by human hands. Yet beneath the stone and dust, I perceived the invisible river of covenant flowing still, waiting for eyes to see and hearts to recognize its eternal light. I saw nations standing as brothers apart, their banners fluttering like pale leaves in the wind, claiming the inheritance of Abraham, yet blinded to the mercy that binds them. Each act of conquest, each claim of right, seemed a repetition of the desert struggle and a shadow cast by those who measure blessing with their hands rather than with faith. And I understood that every human society carries within it the same wilderness, greed and envy, fear and hope, pride and compassion, all interwoven beneath the vast sky that watches and waits. The people moved as phantoms through cities, trading trust for triumph, glory for understanding. Yet angels hovered above the rooftops, their wings shimmering in silent light, whispering that the covenant endures, that mercy is not lost, that the inheritance flows through hearts that bend toward forgiveness. I saw merchants and kings, rulers and scholars, each mirroring Isaac or Ishmael, their desires shaping empires as the wind shapes dunes, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, yet always beneath the gaze of eternity. The rivers of human endeavor twisted and turned like the currents of the unseen desert, and I perceived that war, though loud and violent, is but a reflection of internal exile, the exile of hearts refusing to acknowledge mercy. I walked through marketplaces and temples, through courts and halls of governance, and everywhere the story repeated. A brother turned against a brother, a claim of blessing denied, yet the same covenant whispered in the silence, calling for unity, for understanding, for the recognition that inheritance is shared, that the promise is beyond mere possession. I beheld children running through alleys, their laughter piercing the shadows, and I saw in them the hope that the covenant might yet be fulfilled, that the lessons of the desert could flow into the streets of men, that the echoes of Abraham's tent could awaken even the most hardened heart. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks lost in clouds, and I understood them as the obstacles of human pride, each summit a mirror of the internal struggle to forgive, to reconcile, to see the divine, even in one who has wronged us. Angels descended upon the highest towers, their forms luminous and incorruptible, showing the path through shadow to light, revealing that the world's divisions are temporary, that the covenant's current flows beneath all borders, beneath all laws, beneath every claim of superiority. I saw rivers converging through cities, streams of mercy hidden beneath the noise of conflict. And I realized that the inheritance is not land alone, but the awakening of conscience, the illumination of spirit, the recognition that every act of understanding bends history toward reconciliation. The night sky unfurled like a tapestry, stars spinning in silent testimony to generations yet unborn. And I felt the pulse of all who have walked in pride and all who have walked in faith. The intertwined destinies of Isaac and Ishmael mirrored in every human endeavor, in every society striving for power, yet yearning unknowingly for peace. I saw shadows of human conflict cast long across valleys and plains, yet each shadow contained a spark, a whisper, a glimmer of divine possibility, the power to forgive, the courage to bless, the wisdom to recognize that inheritance is a river flowing through hearts that choose mercy over vengeance. And as the sun set upon the modern city, casting golden light upon streets and hills, I perceived that even in the world of men, the covenant calls and waits, urging each soul to remember, to awaken, to walk the path from shadow to illumination, and that the story of Abraham's sons continues not only in history but in every human heart, shaping societies, guiding nations, and offering the promise that even the most divided of people may yet return to the light, reconciled, and whole beneath the eternal stars. I ascended a ridge where the wind roared like the judgment of centuries, and I beheld the sons of Abraham, their faces etched with pride and sorrow. And I felt within my own chest the call of courage, the summons to stand as witness. Between the forces of division, the angels hovered overhead, their wings spanning the horizon like banners of mercy, and they whispered that the covenant endures, yet it calls for warriors, not of steel, but of spirit, not of conquest, but of compassion. I asked within my soul, who will step into the shadow and bring light, who will lift the hand of forgiveness where swords have fallen, where memory has hardened the heart, the desert stretched endlessly, a mirror of all human strife. And I understood that the battle is not for land nor for crowns, but for the hearts of men, for the inheritance of mercy, for the awakening of conscience. The elder son, still stubborn, lifted his eyes to the heavens, and the younger, weary from wandering, bent low in humility, and the wind carried the sound of angels urging them toward reconciliation, urging them to rise above desire for dominance, to embrace the path of courage. And I perceive that the covenant requires not passive hope, but active faith, to forgive, to bless, to build bridges where walls have been erected, to see the image of God in one who has wronged, and to walk into the desert of fear bearing the light of love. Shadows gathered among the dunes, echoes of centuries of pride, yet each step forward cast a glow that pierced the darkness, showing that even in exile, even in division, mercy may prevail. I saw visions of men and women across lands, each called to act, each called to forgive, each called to bless beyond what is earned or deserved. And the angels whispered that the smallest gesture bends history, that every act of reconciliation, though invisible to mortal eyes, becomes a river flowing into the eternal promise. The sun dipped low, casting long streaks of gold and crimson across the desert. And I understood that courage is forged, not in safety, but in the willingness to love where hatred lingers, to speak peace where discord reigns, to hold fast to the unseen covenant while the world quarrels over what can be grasped by hand. The elder son reached for his brother, not with accusation, but with open palms. And the younger lifted his eyes, meeting the gaze, and in that instant the desert itself seemed to sigh, the dunes shifting, as if acknowledging that mercy had claimed its place. Angels descended upon the ridge, their forms luminous, and whispered that the covenant is fulfilled where hearts dare to bend, where pride is laid aside, where forgiveness reigns stronger than judgment. I perceived that this is the call of every generation, to stand between enmity and understanding, to choose action over apathy, to embody the mercy that flows from the covenant of Abraham, to become the bridge where division once held sway. The desert wind carried the scent of possibility, and I saw visions of cities and nations, of children playing beneath trees where soldiers had marched, of hands joined where walls had stood. And I understood that every act of courage and mercy is a triumph beyond measure, a conquest not of earth but of spirit, and that the inheritance is not the land but the awakening of the heart to the eternal law of love. And as night descended, casting shadows upon the sands, the angel's light remained steadfast, illuminating the path for those willing to rise, to bless, to reconcile. And I felt the pulse of generations flowing through the desert, urging every soul to hear the call, to step into the trial, to bear the weight of mercy, and walk unbroken through the wilderness of human pride, until all sons and daughters of Abraham stand reconciled beneath the stars that first witnessed the covenant. And the earth itself trembles, not with the sounds of war, but with the quiet power of hearts awakened, of courage embraced, of love made manifest. I climbed the highest ridge where the sky opened like a vast cathedral, and I beheld a vision that transcended time and shadow, where Egypt and Assyria and Israel stood together beneath a single sun. Their banners, not of conquest, but of reverence. And the desert itself seemed to bloom in recognition of mercy, fulfilled. The wind carried the scent of incense and the faint murmur of hymns, and I saw children of every lineage lifting their hands in unison, eyes bright with understanding, hearts attuned to the covenant that had waited across generations. Mountains trembled, not in fear, but in silent acknowledgement. Rivers glowed with light unseen, and the stones of Canaan whispered that the rift of centuries had been softened by obedience, by forgiveness, by the courage to lift one another into the light. Angels hovered like banners of flame, their wings spanning horizons wide and infinite, and their song wove through the skies, carrying the melody of Isaiah's prophecy that Egypt, Assyria, and Israel shall be blessed together, a testimony that mercy surpasses enmity, that the covenant of Abraham flows unbroken through every heart, willing to bend to its current. I saw the elders of nations kneeling, not in fear but in awe, their hands trembling as they touched the earth once fought over, now hallowed by reconciliation, and their eyes met across divides that once seemed eternal, recognizing that blessing is not a treasure to hoard, but a river to share. That inheritance is not the claim of one line, but the gift of all who walk in mercy. The sun broke through clouds, scattering golden light upon faces that had known sorrow and exile, illuminating tears and laughter mingled, and I perceived that the covenant is fulfilled not in stone or empire, but in hearts awakened to love, in voices lifted in harmony, where once only cries of anguish rose, from the valleys, from the deserts, from the mountains. Streams of people moved together in pilgrimage, each step a testament to the power of grace, each glance a mirror of the divine. And I realized that even the shadows that had haunted generations now serve to make the light more radiant, that every trial endured, every wound suffered, every act of reconciliation contributes to the symphony of unity. I saw the children of Isaac and the children of Ishmael walking hand in hand beneath the heavens, their laughter mingling with the song of angels, and the desert itself seemed to bend toward joy, the dunes rising and falling like the breath of the earth in exaltation, towers and temples. Once symbols of division glowed with the soft light of understanding, and even the remnants of old conflicts appeared as sketches of lessons learned, teaching that peace is cultivated through courage and mercy, that the inheritance of Abraham is realized when hearts rise above pride, when mercy flows like a river across the land. The stars above spun in patterns that told the story of centuries, of exile and blessing, of laughter and tears, and I understood that even those who had wandered the farthest deserts were held within the same covenant, their paths converging toward the tent of reconciliation, toward the celestial light that illuminates all who seek mercy. The angels' voices rose higher, a chorus of fire and air, and the mountains themselves seemed to lean closer, listening, until the entire horizon shimmered with a brilliance that transcended day and night. And I perceived the prophecy is alive, that the vision of unity is not a dream but a calling, that the covenant's promise waits for those willing to step beyond fear and pride. And I saw the rivers of mercy converge upon the city, the desert blooming with palms and olive trees, the children laughing beneath their shade, and every shadow that had haunted the sons of Abraham faded like mist in the dawn, leaving only the radiance of blessing shared, inheritance flowing through all who walk in faith. The heavens opened wider, and a single voice, neither human nor angel, proclaimed that the covenant endures, that peace has begun in the hearts of those who dare to forgive. That blessing belongs to all who embrace the river of mercy. And I knew that this is the apex of all visions, the fulfillment of promise. The moment when shadow yields to light and the sons of Abraham stand reconciled beneath the eternal stars. And the earth itself exults in harmony, for the covenant is spoken and the prophecy has been fulfilled. See, beneath the eternal canopy of stars, where the night sky stretches beyond memory and time, I beheld the tent of Abraham standing luminous, untouched by shadow, and I felt the covenant pulse through the desert, alive in every grain of sand, every whisper of wind, every heartbeat of the sons who once wandered divided, O Lord of mercy, whose voice first spoke over Abraham's tent. Hear now the prayers of those who walk the paths of Isaac and Ishmael alike, those who carry memory, longing, and the burden of generation, and grant that they may see one another through eyes unclouded by pride, hearts unshackled by vengeance, and hands lifted not to strike but to bless. Let the deserts bloom with understanding. Let the rivers of mercy flow where once enmity reigned. Let the laughter of the innocent mingle with the tears of the exiled, and let the children of all nations rise beneath the same stars, learning that inheritance is not possession but participation in the eternal covenant. Forgive us, O Lord, for the walls we have built where altars once stood, for the pride that has hardened our hearts, for the blindness that has made enemies of brothers and sisters, and grant us courage to lay aside fear and claim the path of reconciliation. May the angels of heaven descend upon the lands once divided, their wings spanning mountains and valleys, their voices singing the melody of mercy. And may every son and daughter of Abraham hear the whisper, return. Return to the light. Return to the heart that beats with love, eternal. Let the covenant, unbroken through ages of wandering, shine now upon Israel and Ishmael alike, upon every soul burdened by history and grief, that they may recognize in one another the reflection of your image, the echo of your promise, and the enduring truth that blessing flows where mercy reigns, O God, whose covenant transcends time and shadow. Receive our prayers as incense. Lift our hearts as wings, and unite the scattered children beneath the canopy of your stars, that the world may glimpse the fullness of your promise, that the sons and daughters of Abraham may stand reconciled, and that the inheritance of faith, mercy, and love may illuminate the earth as it was first intended. Amen.